welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How you doing today, Rob?
I'm doing well. How are you, my friend?
Very good, very good. I've got the Christmas spirit.
Ooh.
I would say the holiday season spirit. It snowed up by me today. It was like our first big snow of the season, which is always fun. By the last snow of the season, you're just miserable and dying for it to be over. The first one's always beautiful. My kids got off from school today, so just hanging out, enjoying this time of year. Oh, can I tell you something?
Please.
I completely forgot about this, but this. Okay, so I saw now in the background here, as Rob, you know well, and some of the audience may know as well. But so I'm a New York City guy. I was born and raised in New York City, lived there my entire life, and then for the last 5 years, I've lived in Jersey. For the last 3 years, I've lived in like the country. Like I bought a house out in the country, and I love it out here. It's nice, and I have a big property, and it's quiet, and it's beautiful. But I'm a New York City Jew in the country, but anyway, so I'm adjusting still to this culture shock. And so this morning I go out. I've never seen anything like this. Okay, so I go out to take the trash out this morning. Pretty mundane task. Now we keep our trash in the shed on the side of my house. So, I got a big driveway. I got to go grab the trash cans and wheel it up to the street. So I go and I'm getting the garbage out. I hear this noise and I don't even know what it is. It sounds like a bird, but like a weird noise for a bird to be making. So I look over and there is a hawk, a huge hawk. I thought it was an eagle when I first saw it, but I'm pretty sure we don't get those around here. But so there's this giant hawk and he's got a squirrel. And he's just ripping them to pieces and eating them. And it's real gross when you get it, like you really see it up close. Like he's got like blood and guts and stuff all in his mouth. And he's taking these bites and like skins like snapping back with every bite. And then I realized, dude, that there's a squirrel up in the tree who's making this noise. And the squirrel's like yelling at him. He's making this crazy noise I've never heard a squirrel make before. He's like, bah, bah,
he's a very liberal squirrel. He thinks he's going to protest it by whining.
Well, it was such a weird moment where I was like, wait, what's going on in that squirrel's mind? Like, how advanced is this? Where he's like, you're killing my buddy. Like, what are you doing? So he's just yelling at this hawk from the tree. He can't do nothing. His buddy didn't make it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but he did not survive the encounter. But I just sat there almost paralyzed with like fascination over this moment. And like the hawk was eating the squirrel and he kept like looking up at the tree. Like the noise was like, it got his attention and he was kind of like, all right, dude, I'm not going to stop eating your buddy. Like, anyway, I don't know. I got nothing more than that, but
did you have to clean squirrel guts out of your shed?
No. So it was on my neighbor's side of the property divide.
Nice.
So that was his problem. And then I was literally just watching it, and then my neighbor's dog came running out, and this scared the hawk away. I hope this dog didn't eat the remainder of the squirrel guts, but I didn't.
Definitely did.
I didn't stick around to find out, Rob. I was like, I'm bringing my trash up. I'm going back inside.
That's the boring side of the nature show, is when the dog. The pet just starts eating what the hawk killed and then going back into the house and just rubbing his face on your shit.
Oh, man. Jesus. And one more reason why I don't want to have a dog out here. But yeah, I never even really thought about that.
By the way, you're such a New York Jew that you call your residential area the country.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, it is. I'd say what you'd really describe, it's a rural suburb, I suppose, is what the technical term would be. Because it's not a suburb. Like when I picture a suburb, I'm still picturing houses like fairly close together, a sidewalk out front, things like that. Whereas like where I am is like a pretty rural area. But yes, that being said, someone who comes from like a really rural country area probably would not consider where I live the country, but whatever. For me, it's pretty goddamn country. All right, let's talk about some stuff. I wanted to open the show with this video that's going super viral right now, and I just found this to be very interesting, and I think it's part of the reason why the video's taken off so much. And I thought it was an interesting conversation for me and you to have about it. And I guess part of the reason why this is such, like, this video hits such a nerve is because I think it does speak to a lot of the underlying issues that are really that really, like, there's this major seismic shift that's going on across the Western world right now. And yet it doesn't get discussed nearly enough. And because of, like, the kind of, not, I don't even want to say woke, but just like the broader, like, the politically correct culture that we live in, that we have lived in my entire lifetime, where there's like there's a severe allergy to anything that could even be considered bigoted. Now, that's changed a lot in the age of the internet and with the rise of the Gen Z, who are kind of not playing by those rules anymore. But nonetheless, that has been the dominant culture for a long time. And so it did kind of paralyze people to have conversations about any of these things. And the dynamic that I'm talking about is that basically throughout the entire Western world, and I guess this is not true for a few Eastern European countries, but almost every white country in the world does not have a birth rate to replace the white majority. So there's this tremendous browning of all of the previously white countries. And people are really starting to notice this. You know, people in countries like Ireland, in cities like London, in countries like Italy, Sweden, but like they've all imported millions and millions of non-white people into their country. Now, for many years, I've talked about this before on the show, but progressives used to brag about this. And in fact, they would call it the browning of America. And they would brag about how this is going to lead to permanent majorities for Democrats. Because, you know, like in America, we've imported, you know, tens of millions of Latinos into the country. And the Democratic strategists would argue, well, they go for Democrats like 70%. So this is going to give us super majorities when they're a huge chunk of the American voting base. And then right-wingers started objecting to it and calling it replacement theory. And then they said that's like a Nazi slogan or something like that, even though it's just a different term for the same thing that you were bragging about. In fact, the great Pat Buchanan had a chapter in his really amazing book that was called Suicide of a Superpower. And it was the chapter was called The End of White America. And this was a very controversial chapter that I think actually got him in a lot of trouble. I think this is what got him fired at MSNBC, if I remember correctly. But if I'm remembering this correctly, it was a quote of some prominent progressive. Like he was quoting what they said. But when you say, like when a right winger says it and you're not for it, then all of a sudden it becomes this thing. But I think like a lot of the reason for the racialist hysteria, and I mean this from the left and the right, a lot of the reason for the rise of the alt-right, a big part of the popularity of Nick Fuentes and the Groypers, a big part of the right-wing reactionary movement in Europe is all about this, like this fundamental dynamic that all of these countries in the Western civilized world have been profoundly changed. And nobody's allowed to object to that, or at least that, you know, I say that in the loosest terms. Obviously, today there are people objecting to it, but for a long time that was kind of the status quo. And so this video just hits a nerve that is kind of hard to explain. But anyway, so the video here is of I don't want to butcher this guy's name, but I surely will. But this is Wajat Ali, or Wahat Ali, but he's a New York Times columnist. So this isn't just some random person, you know, saying this. This is somebody who is a columnist at the newspaper of record. I mean, I don't know if the New York Times is still that, Rob, but you know, it's the New York Times still. So I want to play this video and kind of break it down a little bit. If you want to add anything before, or you want to wait till after?
No, let's play. Let's roll the Wahalit or whatever clip.
Either of us might be close or nowhere near it. Who knows? All right, let's play.
You have lost. You lost. The mistake that you made is you let us in the first place. See, that's the thing with brown people. I'm going to say this as a brown person. There's a lot of us, like a lot. There's like 1.2 billion in India. There's more than 200 million in Pakistan. There's like 170 million in Bangladesh. Those are just the people there. I'm even talking about the folks who are expats or immigrants. There's a bunch of us, and we breed. We're a breeding people. And the problem is you let us in 1965. There were a few of us beforehand, but once you let one of us in, you know what happens with brown folks? Our grandmother comes, our grandfather comes, our uncle comes, our aunt comes, our cousin comes, our second cousin comes, our third cousin comes. Then we have kids, a bunch of kids. And then guess what? Some white women, you know, the Western civilization women, the pure women, the American women, quote unquote, the Rust Belt women, the real women, they like some of us brown folks. We don't take them. They come to us. So we're embedded. We are everywhere. We are everywhere. I've traveled this country. I'm going to speak as a brown person. Brown people are everywhere. There will be a Patel motel or there will be a Desi restaurant everywhere. I want you to realize this. You have lost. Your story is a shitty story filled with misery. It's filled with bland chicken. It's filled with terrible, terrible dry ass meat. Your music sucks. All your culture sucks. Nobody. That's why the kids like listen to black people and their music. That's why the kids love Latinos. Your parties suck because they're monochromatic. Our parties have better food, better music, better looking women.
All right. So, I mean, look, dude, when you hear stuff like this, I really appreciate this guy making this video. I think it's kind of better when people are honest about what their real agenda and what their real views are. I just demand that we also get to be honest in our response. And to me, at least, I'll say the first thing I'll say, I'll turn it over to you because I got a bunch to say on this, but it does seem like if the intention of a video like this isn't to get you to be racist in response, then you really got to rethink what you're doing here, because there is this like, the guy doesn't even realize that he's making the argument for Trump's political existence. Like, doesn't even realize that he is literally making the argument to close the border, to repeal chain migration, and to like expose this whole thing. But it is very hard, I gotta say, to not look. By the way, if we want to be completely honest, Rob, I'll say some of that's true. Like, I like Indian food, I like Thai food, I like, you know, like there is something. Yeah, like maybe they do have better dancers or better parties. But how do you listen to that, Rob, and not respond with, but you know what else we did besides our bland chicken? Was we created the free world that your family risked everything to get to. We have no culture. You want to really take the gloves off on Indian culture? Like, do you want to? Because, by the way, I don't really, but it does kind of make you want to when you hear a video like that. You go like, okay, yeah, like if you guys are so superior and we're so bland and we're so lame, then how come we're not flooding by the millions to India to go live in the culture that your people exclusively built? Or wherever this guy's from. I don't know. He mentioned India. I don't actually know what his background is. But it is something where like there is a disconnect here where you're going to say, white people, you've lost. We've won. We're superior. We're taking over. But the expectation that you know for a fact, Rob, this same guy would grab his panties and lift them up if he heard some of the shit Nick Fuentes is saying, or when he hears some of the shit he's saying. Well, I'm sorry. Why the hell are you allowed to be this type of bigot, but nobody else is able to go, hey, maybe it's reasonable for an Irish person for them to wish Ireland to not become Pakistan? Why exactly are they not allowed to have that feeling? So any thoughts you have, go ahead, Rob.
Well, off the bat, I'll say this guy's being a racialist, and he's saying that we actually have an agenda to not become American or to be a part of your culture, but to actually circumvent it and take it over. And by the way, Indians, their whole culture sucks. Their music sucks. What, this guy's standing by Bollywood really? And their shitty fucking screechy sounds and the people with the lavish, ridiculous dances. I mean,
listen, and I'll give you credit. I'll give you credit where it's due. Garlic naan, delicious.
Yeah, but you like
a nice
American
red curry. I like it.
You like the American version of this stuff. Go to India.
Oh yeah, because it's not, because the only thing to dip your naan in is poop in India. So like, yeah, I like it over here. We got some sides. But go ahead.
I'm a really big fan of freedom, and I actually, and for the most part, I think I enjoy the diverse culture that I'm able to hang out in. I think we see a little bit more of that, being in the stand-up world, and the amount of different people that have chosen to become comics. With that said, I'm also a big fan of the free. You got to get rid of the socialism. That's what kind of allows people to come to this country and be like, hey, we're going to be a block and we're just going to try and take government resources. And I also think it's important to have freedom of discrimination, which I think forces outside groups to actually want to level up their game so that they're not a burden to the local society, or that they're actually engaging in a way that, the locals want to welcome them in. And when you see someone who's like just openly saying, hey, you made a mistake by letting us in, and he's almost describing his family as being roaches. I mean, that's not the way I view him, but he's being racialist, and he's describing himself as, if you let us in, we're going to bring in more, we're going to root into your home, and we're going to breed, and we're going to take it over. And Bud, you're not the dominant society now. And so if you're openly kind of stating that you have an agenda, that you're anti-white and want more brown, I mean, that's it. How do you think the internet's going to take that?
Yeah, I mean, and again, just to be clear here, that this is a New York Times columnist. Like, it's just you do kind of it's one more example. It's like it reminds me of the dynamic with the Zionists, when the people who are like supporting Israel's destruction of Gaza, and then they try to be outraged by whoever, Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, and you're like, dude, you don't have the moral authority to do this anymore. It's like, once you do this, it's like, oh, so you're not just like you're a vicious racist. I don't know. What else can we say? This is the same exact thing. If anybody else, if unprompted, I just started talking about any group of people and we're saying their food sucks, their culture sucks, their women like us more than you, you're like, you'd immediately be like, oh, I know what we're dealing with here. You're a fucking like archaic bigot of some sort. Like, oh, okay. But that's who's working at the New York Times. So where do you get off telling anyone else that they can't be that? And by the way, I'm not saying you should become that, because this guy's a fucking idiot. But the thing, like, I guess, so he says there's a couple things. Like, he says there that, again, I think there is some truth to his point that he goes, look, the problem was letting us in to begin with. Like, okay, there's a reasonable point to be made there, right? Because no question, like, it becomes a lot harder once you've had all of this like mass migration to, like, what are you going to do at that point? But he correctly pins it back to 1965. Now, in 1965, there was an immigration bill that overhauled the way immigration was done in America. And even in like when progressives will often say, as a retort to like the border restrictionism of the Trump movement or something like that, it's been quite often for the last 10 years. How many times, Rob, have you heard a liberal say, we're a nation of immigrants? Like, that's the foundation of our immigration. In fact, J.D. Vance had a great line about that in a CNN interview when he said, yeah, just because we're a nation made up of immigrants doesn't mean that 200 years later we have to have the dumbest immigration policy imaginable. Which is a good line. But if you actually care to look into any of the details of this, like, it's not completely true that like, there is truth to it. And certainly it is true that, like, most people, like that was their story. Like, most people, if you ask them about their family history, the story wasn't like, we came over on the Mayflower or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, most of them were immigrants, at least a few generations ago. But during the big waves of immigration, in the late 1800s and in the early 1900s, there were massive waves of immigration, and then there were periods of big immigration restriction and assimilation. Before 1965, from the founding of our country, there was at a period at the very beginning of the country, I think, essentially open borders. But to the degree that there was any immigration control for most of American history, the early part, it explicitly gave preferential treatment to white Christian Europeans. Now, people didn't have any problem being racialist in those days, and the idea, however you feel about it, not saying you have to support this or not, but the idea was that that's what keeps America having its American characteristic, that we are Europeans who came over from Europe for more freedom to escape tyranny in Europe, and that then we assimilate into this American culture. And that's how you keep this thing. Now, in 1965, okay, they passed this bill, which totally changed the racial and cultural demographics of the country, but they swore up and down that it wouldn't. Okay, that was the way they sold the bill. Was like, it's not going to change the racial demographics in the country at all. Because think about it, right, Rob? This is 1 year after the Civil Rights Act got signed into law. It got signed in 64. This was in 65. This is 1 year after segregation ended. Like, in large parts of this country, it was accepted 1 year earlier that there's an area where black people can live, and then there's an area where white people can live. There's a store that's for black people only, and there's a store that's for white people only. And the next year, do you think America would have voted to think about like how much racial tension there already was and how much bigotry there already was in the country? You think anyone would have voted like, yeah, let's add into the mix tens of millions of other racial demographics? So in other words, in response to this guy's point here, you would, for all these people who claim to love democracy so much, you would have to admit that like the American people never made that decision, right? That was forced on them from the ruling political elite onto the American people, who everybody knows. If you had a referendum on this in 1965, 66, 67, 68, 69, all the way up to today, the bill would have failed. There's no chance that the American people, even today, in our multiracial, multicultural society, even immigrants don't support it. Even immigrants don't want a wide open border. And so there's even illegal immigrants don't want it, like even they don't want it. They got in, but they don't want everybody else to get in too. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. And so essentially what you have here is this guy unintentionally, from the left, making the argument for mass deportations in a sense. Because I think what we've all kind of recognized is that, like, look, I'm a little bit squeamish about mass deportations. I'm not afraid to admit that. I believe in liberty, and I don't like the government, and I don't want the government doing anything to people. And then there's a whole bunch of people who, like, even the ones who came in illegally, a lot of them aren't bad people or anything like that. And that's kind of tough to deal with, like federal cops grabbing a mom and her kids and kicking them out of the country, But the thing is that we're caught between a rock and a hard place here. We're caught, it's like either you have to accept the fact that our government just did this to the people and that they have absolutely no recourse, that you have no right to protect anything about your country, that you just have to accept that the racial demographics, the cultural demographics, the norms that you grew up with, like everything is taken from you. You have to accept that Ireland is going to become Pakistan, or you got to deport a whole bunch of people. Like, those are the options. And from my perspective, neither of them seem like great options. But like, when you hear a guy making the argument just like this, Rob, doesn't it push you in the direction of just like, okay, very good point, New York Times columnist. Thanks for being honest. You all have to go. Like, it just kind of like, it pushes you in that direction that, okay, between these two bad options, how about I pick the one where this fucking smug prick doesn't get to win?
Yeah,
Any thoughts, Rob?
Well, there's even something like when I go to Boston, I want to hear some authentic Boston accents. And it's almost like disappointing if you don't run into like a real Boston person. Same with Georgia. Georgia's got a very like recognizable accent. I've never been to France or Italy. But if I traveled from France into Italy and I showed up into Italy and there's only French food and everyone's talking French, I'm like, well, that's disappointing. And now I'm just describing white cultures right now. I'm literally just describing white cultures. But there's something to showing up to an area and being like, oh, all the people are kind of like this. Let's see what these people are all about. And I don't know, there's just something like it even transcends race, but just like letting people like be who they are, and they should be allowed to make decisions that they don't want overwhelmingly new populations with different values coming into their area and changing it. Like, imagine if like a whole frat house moved to Japan and started Bro USA in the middle of Japan. And then they were out there going, hey, your bitches love our frat house and your culture sucks. You think the Japs are going to tolerate that?
Yeah, right. I mean, imagine that. And also, I mean, whatever. It's just like with guy, it's very hard to not be provoked into just like having an equal opposite response. And like, but it's just all my instincts. I have to fight all my teenage instincts to not just be like, really? Is that what's happening? The bitches are flooding to the Indian dudes. Is that what's happening, dude? Really? Oh yeah, you guys are just cleaning up, like whatever.
He's declaring color war. We didn't do it.
Well, that's right. But but there is something there where you see how, like genuinely comfortable with being a pure bigot, the progressive Democrats are, like they're just allowed to say it. So you're like, okay, I mean, if you want to play this game, good luck. But I completely agree with you. And in fact, I think that the spirit of kind of like I think the spirit of like anti-racism, to use that term, and I don't mean anti-racism TM, I just mean like being against racism or being against bigotry. I mean, I would think that would be like a respect for different cultures and different races and different traditions and seeing beauty in all of them, because like there is beauty in all of them. And that's something that's like, it's amazing. Even and it's just a logical extension of how you treat individuals. Like individuals are all different in their own ways, and there's something beautiful about that. And if we were all the same, like in some way, you could say it in a way where that might sound kind of nice, like we're all equal or we're all one. But if you really like finish that movie in your head, it's actually like a dystopian nightmare, the idea that we'd all be exactly the same. There's beauty in our differences. But yes, that being said, like I think the logical extension from that is not that therefore we must tear down every culture and force everybody into one uniculture or something like that. I think the idea is that like, no, like you said, you want to preserve Japan, you want to preserve Rome, you want to preserve Dublin, you want to have different like I know I have family members who just went over to Italy and they were blown away by how many Muslims there are in Rome. They were like, dude, everything's like a Muslim-owned store in the middle of Rome. And like, they're not bigots or nothing like that. It's just that they went to Italy. Like, obviously, they wanted to go have like an authentic Italian experience. And likewise, I will say that it's not even like, it's not purely a racialist argument. I mean, I don't know, like where does is it race? Is it culture? It's like, I don't know. Has that experiment ever really been run? I don't know. But what I do know is that you drastically and radically change foundational aspects of a society when you have mass importation of foreigners. This very basic stuff. And like, I don't know, it raises the question of like, who owns the country? Well, the myth of America is that we own it. And then we own it through our elected representatives who are our public servants but in a sense, I do think like, and I'm not making an argument for collective ownership. I'm not saying like we all own it all together, but it's just like, it seems very reasonable to me to say that like, what you said, like with the example of frat guys going to Japan. Well, how many American frat bros ought to be allowed into Japan? Well, it seems very obvious to me that the answer is whatever Japan decides. Whatever they say. If they say none, then the answer is none. And if they say as many can come as can come, then as many can come as can come. Now, obviously, I'm not saying there's like one Japan that has its collective will, but broadly speaking, if like approximately 0% of Americans would have supported our immigration policy, then I think it's reasonable to say like, yeah, that was wrong. That was done to the American people. Now, I don't know how anybody who claims to defend democracy can defend this. It's like, oh, you lost and you fucked up when you let in the first brown person. Well, do you think Americans would have supported that? Like, would they have supported? Oh, I guess we're going to lose. We're going to lose our culture. We're going to lose our women. We're going to lose whatever he means by that. Would they have voluntarily lost? No. In other words, you're saying, haha, you got fucking tricked. And I will say that, look, obviously, I've never had the experience of being an immigrant. I could imagine a scenario like where I don't know, if this country really fell to shit and like the only place where I thought my kids could be safe was, say, Japan, and Japan was willing to let me in, and it saved my life. Like my just my, you know, I'm successful. Let's say I go to Japan, I'm a columnist in their #1 newspaper or something like that. Like I was in abject poverty and now I'm having a nice life over here. It would seem to me that the decent thing to do would be to have an attitude of kind of like gratitude toward Japan as a nation and the Japanese people, and go, man, that was pretty cool that you let me in here. And I could not imagine a scenario where then this country like saves my family's life, allows us in, and then I'm turning around and going, guess what, you stinking Japanese? You lost because your women like us better and we're taking over and we're going to outbreed you. And what do you got, your bland ass sushi? Well, get ready for some fried chicken, motherfucker. You know, like I just could not imagine just like saying this out loud and not just going like, first of all, I'm just an awful person. And second of all, what type of reaction do I imagine that I'm provoking here? It's wild.
I think there's the word that comes to mind is there's an etiquette to being a guest in somebody's home. And that's assimilating with the family, making sure you're not being a burden on them, figuring out how to become a contributor. And then maybe over time you get to do a little bit of your own culture because people are like, oh, what's this Jew boy about? Right. Oh, we'll do one of your holidays. And then you integrate yourself. But when you show up and you go, hey, fuck you guys, fuck your society, fuck the whole thing, we're taking this over. I mean, that's it's gross. It's bad etiquette.
Yeah, and look, man, like there is, I guess, I think there is some value in tradition. Like I'm not saying everything has to stay exactly the same. And in fact, that never happens, of course. But there is some value in conserving the good parts of a society and keeping some things like somewhat similar. And I just don't I think no matter what it is, if you're forcing a radical change on a group of people against their will, it's reasonable for them to resist that. And I think that it's hard for someone like me, right? Like I was born in 1983 and I was a kid in the 80s. I mean, I have more memories of the 90s, but I was like, you know, I have early memories. I have memories from like being 3 years old and shit, pretty vivid ones too. You know, I was whatever in 1989, I was 6 or 7 or whatever. And look, man, the country from the 1980s to 2025 is it's a radically different country. It's a radically different country in many, many, many ways. Now, I'm not like, by the way, I'm not putting all of that at the feet of brown immigrants into the country. Like there's been many factors that have changed the country. And I think anybody who has listened to me as a public, you know, figure for years now, it's not like, I don't think you've ever gotten a hint of like hatred toward brown immigrants who are coming into the country, who I hate the ruling elite who have presided over destroying this country. I don't hate regular people. But the fact remains, this is not the same country that I grew up in the 80s. It is drastically different. And in many ways, it's drastically worse. We were not in a state of permanent emergency. We you know, if you go watch movies from when I was a little kid, the cheesy, hacky ending to a rom-com was the guy chasing the chick all the way to the plane gate, because you used to be able to do that, Rob. We weren't living in a permanent state of emergency where little old ladies had to get groped at the airport all the time. The government was not spying on us in the way that we are. We were not in a state of perpetual war. I mean, when the Cold War was going on, there were problems, but we were not engaged in forever wars. We were not tens of trillions of dollars in debt, bankrupting the country. And we just simply did not have the level of political and racial and cultural divides that we have today in the country. I don't like a lot of that. I wish we didn't have a lot of this stuff. I mean, I would have to find something else to rant about. That's a fair point. But like, I think a lot of this is bad. And so, you know, it's like, if the people are against this radical change, and essentially what really is the message here of what this guy's saying? He's basically saying, fucking accept it, dude. Accept it. You're going into the dustbin of history. Accept that and deal with it. You already lost. Well, I don't know how many men you've been around in your life, but you might find that some men have a different reaction to that than going, oh, all right, I guess this guy from a different country, from a different culture, with a different skin color, just told me I lost to him. I guess I'll just accept that. That's probably not how it's going to go. I did here, let me I wanted to cover this other story too, because I thought this was interesting. Yeah, let's pull up the Stephen Miller video that I sent, Natalie. It was the second to last one that I sent over. It's titled "Conspiracy Theory No More." But this was an interesting comment that Stephen Miller made on Fox News the other day, and so I wanted to play this.
For your audience perfectly, Sean. This was not a loophole. The Biden administration, Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, devised a scheme to fly illegal aliens into the country and then to escort them en masse across the border by the millions, and to give them something known as parole, which gives them a work permit, which gives them a social security number, which gives them access to the voting booth. This was the plan all along, to get them here illegally so they can get free government benefits, get hooked to welfare, and be able to participate in American elections. This was an attack on democracy by the Democrat Party. It's the same attack that we see, Sean, when you have California, a sanctuary state, that is refusing to turn over even illegal alien criminals and gang members to ICE. So these are illegal aliens in California who have been arrested by California police, by California law enforcement for serious crimes, for crimes against children, for felonies, for crimes that threaten public safety, and they are refusing to hand these criminal illegal aliens over to ICE. Instead, they're freeing them back into the cities to offend and offend again. By any definition, what California is doing is criminal. It is a violation of our laws. It is one of the most heinous things that I have seen in my entire.
All right. So, I mean, look, Stephen Miller is alleging a pretty serious conspiracy here. Now, look, I don't know exactly how much maybe he's exaggerating, or maybe not at all, which is quite possible too. But I know this is something that me and you, Rob, talked about a lot over the Biden years. And I think this is something that I got in a lot of fights with other libertarians about, because there are, you know, a group of libertarians who believe in like open borders and view like the government having border restrictions as the government doing something to peaceful people. But like, I don't know. Look, Rob, I get tired of being right all the time. But the point is that no, dude, like take a look at, you look at the caravans like that. And we used to talk about this all the time in the Biden years. Look, obviously this isn't organic. This isn't just spontaneously happening without it being directed in some ways. And then it came out that the UN and all these NGOs were funding a bunch of these migrant caravans. And now it's being alleged by a pretty senior member in the White House that actually this was a Biden policy to, by the millions, import foreigners into the country. When you really put this all together, what is this other than in the same way that a tax or a regulation or any government program is the government imposing something on its people, or any new law? This was the government imposing something on their people. But just think for a moment how profound that it, you know, look, man, we had really dumb tax policies. I mean, we still have really dumb tax policies, but we had like 90% top marginal rates, you know, at one point in this country. I mean, no one ever paid them, you know, it was ridiculous. But the government can impose a lot on people. Look, as we've witnessed, Rob, government can even impose lockdowns on people, and then the lockdowns can end. Now, it's not saying that there's not still a cost to bear to that, but there is something about, like, let's say you're the government of Ireland and you import 20 million Muslims into the country. There is something different. Like, there's something unique about that imposition from a government as opposed to all of these others, because it creates an irreversible change. You know, it's like a forcing move that either Ireland goes away and your people go extinct, or You have to embrace some type of authoritarianism to get all of these people out of your country. And either way, that's just, it like drastically foundationally changes the character of a nation. And so I don't know. It's like you could argue in a sense that this is in many ways like the most profound betrayal, like the most profound treason is to actually like almost in a sense exterminate your own civilization. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I think it's obvious when you look at the numbers that the Biden administration, either from Biden or they took advantage of Biden, but somebody was looking to bring as many people over the border as possible. Speaking to someone just like of the criminality that he mentioned, one is I didn't know that this was happening in California, but I have heard these stories of essentially people being arrested for criminal conduct. And then it does not make sense why you wouldn't just hand those people over to ICE. I mean, just talk about stupid policy.
Yeah.
I understand that we don't want everyone deported, but if someone's engaged in criminal behavior in this country and they're not even supposed to be in this country, the idea that you won't let the other department deal with it and potentially deport them, why are you taking a stand towards criminal people that shouldn't be in this country at all? Why are you taking a stand on making sure that they can remain here if they've already engaged in criminal behavior? That's crazy.
Pretty crazy.
The parole system, I didn't realize that they got Social Security numbers. The way I understood the paroling was that the kids in cages thing was basically so bad and that detention centers were so overwhelmed that they were essentially just granting parole to large numbers of people that were sneaking across the border illegally, essentially to keep the optics down of just how bad the situation at the border was, that they didn't want them in facilities. And so they were using the parole system and they used it on a number of people. I've yet to hear that they were actually picking people up in Mexico and then flying them into the country and paroling them, nor that they are currently naturalized in a way that they're able to vote or are voting in mass in elections. Now, that's not to say that they didn't have an agenda to hopefully naturalize these people down the line and get them to vote. But either way, it makes zero sense that California or other people are busting illegal immigrants for illegal behavior on top of sneaking into the country and not giving them over to ICE to deport. I mean, that's insane. And then also, absolutely, there should be more of an investigation into what Biden was doing with the parole system, because I think it was mostly they were covering up just how many people were coming in, and that was the easiest loophole to basically just send them into the country and pretend like, oh, they're going to show up for a court date in 3 years when we get to it. Sure.
Yeah. No, it's look, I don't know what's ultimately gonna come of is that noise by you, Rob?
Yeah, I gotta I'll just mute my mic.
Well, I know that I actually talked about this a bit with Nick Fuentes of all people when he was on the show, but at a certain point, okay, perfect. So at a certain point, you're like, look, man, there is some truth to the point that New York Times guy was making earlier, right? You can't go back to 1965 and undo it. I mean, that would be the humane way to do this, right? Would be to get in our time machine and go back in time and not import the world into America and keep America as what it was. But we can't do that. We don't have that option. And so, who knows how many people are going to actually end up being deported? Not nearly enough. I mean, there's no way that Donald Trump is going to deport enough people that it undoes what Joe Biden did. There's just no chance that that's happening. He doesn't have the political will. He doesn't have the plan. And I'm not sure the American people would take it, to be honest. Even if you show some polls where a majority of them support it, that's a different thing, as I've pointed out before, than actually supporting it while it's happening. But if that is the case, that like, okay, well then one way or another, we're going forward as like a true multicultural, multiracial society, then the only way, and I'm not saying this is not something that is the role for government, nor something that government can achieve. This is a cultural thing that we have to develop. But like the only way to do that in a way that doesn't just lead to destruction and violence and at worst civil war is you can't do what that guy was doing. That's got to kind of be the rule, not the law, but there's got to be like a cultural rule about that. Like you can't have that attitude, dude. if you want to live in like if we want to have some type of harmony in a multiracial, multicultural society, then the deal has to be you can't have this attitude of like we're getting the whites are the bad guys. You're the only group that it's socially acceptable to just be openly bigoted against, because that shit's a recipe for disaster. And you know, it's amazing to me that just people seem to be like, I guess what's fascinating to me is that like people are so bad at reading the temperature of the room, you know, and going like, haven't we gotten to the point where you've seen, dude, you want to keep pushing this shit, there's going to be an ugly backlash to it. An ugly backlash to it. And then, you know, to your point, Rob, you know, you're right about all that, but none of these investigations are going to happen. No one's going to be held accountable. And, you know, it's just like, we're going to move forward as this country now. And all right, another topic that I found fairly concerning. Again, this is kind of on the, you know, just, I'm tired of being right. I'm sure you are too, Rob. But so there was, you know, I kind of made a big deal about the elections that happened earlier this month. And of course, you know, as the Democrats won big in New Jersey and Virginia and New York City. And, you know, I was making the point that like this is a real problem for Republicans, and that this is like, you know, they should really wake up and take this as a serious like a cautionary tale. And one of the areas where I got pushback was people were like, what are you talking about, Dave? I mean, these were all Democratic strongholds. And my like counter to that was that, well, okay, but the last gubernatorial election in New Jersey was razor thin, and this one was a blowout. So why? And by the way, it was the same Republican candidate. It was the same Republican candidate came within like a point of winning last time, and this time he got blown out. Virginia, why the hell should Virginia not be competitive in the wake of 2024 and the Biden-Kamala Harris disaster? But now we've got another election. Now, again, this is just one election, so make of it what you will. But this one was in a Republican stronghold. It's a special election in Tennessee. I'm sorry, which it's the seventh congressional district of Tennessee. And the Republican Mark Green, who he retired. So they have the special election, and it is a toss-up. The Republican won this seat by 20 points, and it's now a toss-up. And I'm sorry, but this is just seems to be one more compelling piece of evidence that there is something to my narrative here. That like Donald Trump came in at the beginning of 2024, excuse me, at the beginning of 2025, he assumes the office of presidency in January with his highest approval ratings, and more importantly than that, the highest approval for his agenda that he's ever had. And by the end of this year, you know, also juxtapose that with at the beginning of this year, the Democrats are in utter shambles. And at the end of this year, the Democrats are doing great in elections. And Donald Trump is down with some of his lowest approval ratings, and approval for his agenda has fallen. It's what we're saying almost every show here that you just can't get away from. This is a disaster. It's a disaster for Trump. It's a disaster for the Republican Party. And it's a disaster for our country. So like people better start waking up to this shit. Oh, by the way, Rob, do you know what the Democrat is running on in Tennessee? You're never going to guess it. The unaffordability crisis. Just like they won in Jersey, just like they won in Virginia, just like they won in New York City. All about the unaffordability crisis, except none of these guys even know what an unaffordability crisis is, Rob. They don't even have an answer. They're running on a thing that they can't even fucking describe. They're running on, why? Hey, Zohran Mamdani, why is there an unaffordability crisis? What do you think his answer is? Well, people really want to move to New York City and greedy corporations. Yeah? You think it has something to do with the fact that we created a third of the money that's ever existed in the last decade? You think that might be connected to it? Do you think maybe there might be something about the trillions and trillions and trillions of new dollars that we printed and injected into the economy? Might that be related to why things cost more? Like, they don't even have that, but they're winning on that issue. And why? Why are they winning on that issue? Because Donald Trump's not doing shit about it.
I can't stand the term unaffordability crisis, because a year ago, people were actually wising up to this problem called inflation. And they were using the word inflation for why things suddenly cost more. But then you start calling it an unaffordability crisis, and almost sounds like, oh, what we need to do is just hand people more money, and then they could afford this stuff.
Right.
Ignoring the reality of that then the prices will just keep going up. And that's not what's going to actually make it more affordable. But as we've said on this show before, sadly, Donald Trump is a social democrat as well. And if he just wants to talk about socialism, he leaves room for other people to come in and go, well, I want more socialism. I'll give you even more free stuff than that guy is, because the problem is it's unaffordable. And it just plays into this idea that it can all be free if government just spends more money, and obviously ignores the fact that it's actually inflation. 1 year ago, it was a year ago, people were aware of inflation. It was in the news. People were talking about it.
His whole presidential campaign was against the inflation.
And with a single word, they've managed to re-steer the retards towards government spending, that it's not an inflation problem, it's an unaffordability crisis.
Yeah, no, you have the big government progressives running on unaffordability, and therefore the answer is government should do all this stuff. It's just, it's infuriating, and it's just a disaster for the country. But here is what the Trump administration is focused on. Look, Rob, I mean, we've gotten some wins. We renamed the Defense Department to the Department of War. And our Secretary of War is tweeting pictures about blowing up boats in a little kid's book form, I guess. Can we pull the image of that up, Natalie? Is the tweet that Pete Hegseth, who, again, I got to say, like, much like Kash Patel, by many accounts, seems to just be like a clown who's in way over his head. And certainly doesn't seem to be good on almost any issue. But so he tweeted this. Now, I don't know these. My kids never read the Franklin. I'm assuming this is like a kid's book. But he said, Franklin targets narco terrorists. Ain't that funny? So this is the thing. Now, of course, this is like, he puts this out to like provoke on Twitter, and then, it gets this big reaction. I got to say, man, and far be it from me to ever, ever criticize dark humor, but I do find it a little bit different when it's coming from government officials, particularly ones who are committing war crimes. I actually think it's really actually pretty gross to be joking around about the war crimes that you just committed. But just imagine it, dude. First of all, there is the Trump administration, as we mentioned the other day, is clearly lying us into a war. They're clearly lying and trying to move us closer and closer toward a war. They have been killing a bunch of people they claim are drug dealers. They've never demonstrated that they are. By the way, it is absolutely illegal to just murder drug dealers. Like, that's not legal at all. So even if they are drug dealers, like, you don't get to murder them, especially when you're not in a war with that country. And the double tap strike is just obviously illegal under international law. Of course, as you guys may have noticed, if you've been paying attention to Gaza for the last 2 years, the thing about international law is that it doesn't exist. That's the major flaw in international law, is that there's no such thing. It's just made up. But like, by definition, I mean, it's words written down on a piece of paper, but it's only as good. Any law is only as good as how much it can be enforced. And so, yes, it's just clearly illegal, but here you are. Well, that's great. That's great, Pete Hegseth. You're joking around about the war crimes you've committed while you're losing the fucking country. Thanks, Donald Trump administration.
Can I talk about this double strike tap thing that everyone's outraged about? In my opinion, it is no worse than the initial strike, and this is so stupid. You've got, firstly, they're taking out these boats who they're claiming are narco terrorists. Now, as to whether they actually are, firstly, as you said, they should probably be tried. But secondly, we don't actually know that. They could be oil smugglers, fishermen. We don't know that everyone that's been killed was actually bringing fentanyl into our country. So now you've got these people are, even if they were narco terrorists, you're attacking
whatever that word means.
Fine. You're attacking them with missiles from the sky. They're essentially defenseless. They're not like, if they're holding a gun, it doesn't matter. You're bombing them from the sky. Whatever.
Yeah.
They're not. Secondly, the idea that they're an imminent threat when they're not even headed directly to our country. What right do you have? I'm just saying, even if you wanted to say these are narco-terrorists, they have no ability to defend themselves, and they're not an imminent threat to the country because they're not coming directly here. So the fact that you intended to kill somebody and then you missed on the first strike and you basically want to wipe away the evidence of whether or not those were people to be killed, I don't really see why it's so much worse on the second strike than the first strike. And I think the media needs to pivot to just criticizing what's actually going on here.
Well, look, I agree. I agree with you on that. Yes. But I think the thing that makes, look, it's even in a war, like in a declared war, the rules are supposed to be, right, that you're not allowed to kill people who have been injured and removed from the battle or are surrendering. Like, I don't know if you saw that video the other day, Rob, of the IDF just murdering 2 people in the West Bank, who they literally are. I mean, look, dude, I know you can say you can't get everything from a videotape or something, but they have their hands up. They raise their shirt to show that they have no weapons. They're trying to surrender. The IDF forces them back into the building and then just murders both of them. Now, also, the IDF spokesman lied through his teeth about what had happened, and then the video came out and we saw what really happened. Also, Ben Gavir was like championing both of those guys, promoting them. The point is, you're not allowed to do that, theoretically, if the laws of war actually did exist or whatever. And so I guess that is where I do think it's reasonable to go like, hey, wait, what exactly is going on here? Because to your point, Rob, right, we're not engaged in a firefight with these guys. We're hitting them with Hellfire missiles from the sky, drone bombing them. And then why exactly would you then need to come take out the injured survivors who were like ejected from the boat? I think it at least lends credibility to the idea that they're trying to cover something up here. And also it's just it's a blatant war crime. And I think that's maybe why people focus on it, because it's almost indisputable that you're not allowed to do that, or at least you pretend you're not allowed to do that. The fact that they did it and all get away with it indicates that they are actually allowed to do it. But I agree with you, Rob, that
I'm just saying the fundamentals are these people are not an imminent threat. You haven't actually tried them, and they're defenseless. So if it's on a second strike or a first strike, you were always doing the exact same thing, which was taking out people that weren't an imminent threat without trying them.
Yeah, I think yes, what I very much agree with you on is that, broadly speaking, it should be opposition to this entire policy. And in fact, as I've said many times over the years, but I do think I think there's a lot of great things about American society. I think there's a lot of great things about living in America, and I like it, and I'm not going anywhere until everything falls apart, and I gotta hope the Japanese let me in. But I think that there is a real sickness in American culture that I think has really been put there by the war party, where there's like we could be at war and people don't even know about it. Like, the average American has no idea that we're at war in Somalia. No idea. Trump just broke the record for the most strikes against Somalia in the 20 years that we've been bombing them. Most Americans don't even know about that. The Americans don't even know. Like, if you were just to name the countries that Barack Obama bombed, like, I'm saying, if I just went out on the street and started asking people what countries did Barack Obama bomb, was the average people maybe give me 1 or 2 of them, maybe. I mean, I guess they'd know Iraq and Afghanistan, right? But like, how many of them even know that we toppled the government in Libya, started a civil war in Syria, the decimated Yemen, drone bombed the shit out of Pakistan? And how many people even know that? And there's something sick about any society where they go to war so carelessly. Like, you don't treat war as like a thing that they're at least like, even if you're lied into a war, which has happened to many nations, but even if you're lied into a war, at least like the politicians had to come up with a lie that made you think that this was absolutely necessary. Like, God damn, we know this is a last resort, but in this case, we really do have to do it because they're a real threat to kill a lot of our people, or they already have killed a lot of our people, or whatever. Like, the fact that just knowing none of that is true. Nobody pretends that in any meaningful way Venezuela represents a threat to the United States of America. And the fact that we can still so kind of we can go to war, and Americans can even support a war without even really thinking or caring much about it. And I do think there's something like profoundly sick about that. Because, like, again, whatever, I don't want to sound like a hippie or something. It's just, but this to me should just be like common. You know, I mean, I know even like, I don't know, the perspective of like Natalie, who, like, when you first came on this show, and like, I guess like I'd imagine like, you know, I mean, I don't know, but I'd imagine like the image of me is like, oh, I do this like right-wing show or something. But then all day, all I ever want to talk about is the babies that get killed in war. Because, like, first of all, I do think there's a real right-wing critique of war. But also just like on the bottom line, forget left or right or anything. We're just like, as a person, just go, those are real human beings over there, man. Like, even like, dude, even if these guys are drug dealers, like, I don't know, I've known some drug dealers in my day. You don't fucking just give them the extrajudicial death penalty for it. Like, yeah, drugs are bad, you know, but like, okay, what? And then, of course, the flirting with a wider war. Well, what does a wider war mean? A wider war means like fucking women hold their dead children in their arms and wail in pain. You know what I mean? Like, as a real mother who's every bit as much of a mother as the mother to my kids is a mother to my kids. Like, then the fact that we just run into this shit so recklessly, always from one to the other, to the other, to the other, always. I mean, dude, we've been fighting since 2003. America has been involved in multiple wars. We have not had 1 month where we weren't involved in multiple wars. And this is just like no way for a just society to exist. All right, we got to wrap up the show there. Rob, what dates you got coming up? Let them know.
Everybody, check out the Run Your Mouth podcast. New episodes weekly, and then I've got Denver, which is gonna sell out. So come grab your tickets. It's a small room. Doing early Sunday. Gonna get hammered and then get on a flight home. So you know, come brunch with me. It's gonna be a good time.
Hell yeah, Rob's let me tell you something. Rob's a good hang at brunch. It's a good time. Good guy to brunch with. All right, guys. And then, you know, me and Rob will be back on the road in January. We got Philly, Portland, Oregon, Key West, one other one, comicdavesmith.com. Go check all those out. All right. Catch you guys next time. Peace.